Live from Rialto, California, Mark Flores presents the Pay-Per-View Wrestling Podcast. Tonight's topic, is NXT hurting the WWE main roster? It's all culminating here on the Pay-Per-View Wrestling Podcast. Here's your host, Mark Flores. Hey guys, thank you for tuning in to the Pay-Per-View Wrestling Podcast. I'm your host, Mark Flores, and tonight we talk about a topic that has been brought to my attention by the We Watch Wrestling Podcast Facebook group. Big shout out to you guys for getting involved. I actually heard about this topic on a post that I commented that I was going to actually bring in my 2 cents and my opinions on it. So, here it is. But before I get into that, I want to let you know that this Pay-Per-View Wrestling Podcast is brought to you by none other than my proud sponsor, Game Swappers. Game Swappers. Buy, sell, and trade your retro games and next-gen consoles here at Game Swappers. You can come into contact with Game Swappers via Instagram at GAMESWAPPERS. That's GAMESWAPPERS. Game Swappers. Buy, sell, and trade. Keep in mind, guys, that if you do share the Pay-Per-View Wrestling Podcast on your social media, you'll be able to get 10% off towards your purchase of any retro game at Game Swappers, or if you're not in the interest of buying games from Game Swappers, you can also get 10% more towards your retro game trade-ins. Simply take a screenshot of what you shared, what podcast you shared, show the person on staff working at Game Swappers via direct message or in person at the store, and you'll be able to get 10% off. Once again, it's on Game Swappers is available via Instagram at GAMESWAPPERS. Game Swappers, buy, sell, and trade. Other than that, let's get into the topic that we have here. Is there an issue within WWE that we don't want to talk about? Is there something that Triple H and the rest of people of creative are making sure that we don't see? Does NXT have a glaring weakness that needs to be addressed? Does the main roster have something that needs to be addressed? Allow me to paint a scenario for you guys. NXT champion Shinsuke Nakamura is 36 years old. In terms of wrestling age, he's nearing the end of his prime, 35 to 40 years old. At 36, he got 4 years left. That's a couple good main event matches in him left. He's seen in the eyes of wrestling fans, in the internet wrestling community, as the creme de la creme of strong style Japanese wrestling. He's known the world over. Here's the scenario. What if he gets injured and is forced to retire before he even gets to the main roster? That's something that has been going through my mind repetitively the last couple of weeks due to his aggressive style, due to how he works, and due to his past history of injury. My question to you with that is, who will get the worst of the situation? On one side of the coin, you have the fans who don't get Shinsuke Nakamura on the main roster. Or does WWE as a business miss the mark by not having one of the most prestigious stars of the last decade on the main roster? WWE, if Shinsuke Nakamura gets injured on NXT, and keep in mind that NXT is only on the WWE network, limited to only 1 million people, roughly, as far as their subscribers go, they will miss out on global recognition for the people who do not subscribe to the WWE Network, who miss them on weekly national television in terms of the United States. Much more merchandise opportunities globally. I know he does his fair share of merchandise revenue via NXT. That's good. The first time his shirt went on sale at the NXT store, they instantly sold out, so that's a good sign. But on a large scale such as WWE putting Shinsuke Nakamura on the main roster, they will definitely miss out on an opportunity if he gets injured. And that's an if nonetheless. My question to you guys is this. Is NXT hurting the main roster? Or, I strike that actually. The question that I got that I'm going to answer is NXT hurting the WWE main roster? Let's see what we have here. This is quite the subject. Once again, this subject was brought onto the WWE Games Facebook group that I'm a part of. Very great, lively conversations that we have on there. Definitely fun to be on it. I'm glad I actually joined it a few months ago. But anyway, is NXT hurting the WWE main roster? In order for this question to be answered effectively, let me get some statistics out of the way. This is a list of people that do not match the description of young NXT superstar. Eric Young, 36 years old. Samoa Joe, 37 years old. Austin Aries, 38 years old. We mentioned already Shinsuke Nakamura, 36. Bobby Roode, 39 years old. James Storm, 39 years old. With the exception of Eric Young and James Storm, everyone else that I mentioned is actually on a full-time NXT contract. All of these ex-TNA superstars are on the bad side of 30. Ex-TNA with the exception of Shinsuke Nakamura. There are only a handful of reasons why NXT decided to sign these guys. The reason that NXT goes out to sign these ex-TNA superstars, and even with the exception of Sami Callihan, also known as Sami Callihan's character, which is beyond me right now, but the reason that NXT does this, looks for independent superstars from Ring of Honor, from Pacific Coast Wrestling. The reason they do this is they want to add superstar depth to a very weak roster without them. Finn Balor, export from New Japan Pro Wrestling. Even when Seth Rollins came out, Ring of Honor. CM Punk, Ring of Honor. Daniel Bryan, Ring of Honor. In the terms of NXT superstars, the reason they brought NXT superstars now to NXT, because NXT is actually being displayed on the WWE Network, is because they're adding superstar depth to a very weak roster. Because they have exported Finn Balor to the main roster, they've exported American Alpha to the main roster. If anything, you know who these guys are. This is what's going to make the average fan tune into NXT. That's what's going to be able to tune in, to have people tune in to the television, to the WWE Network. They'll come as heels to put young talent over. That's what all these guys, Samoa Joe, heel. Austin Aries is a heel. Bobby Roode's a heel. The thing that puzzles me the most is why people have this conception that NXT is hurting WWE's main roster. There's no roster situation, there's no roster issue that WWE has. WWE actually has so much roster depth is that they had to split into 2 shows. You have 2 independent rosters on 2 different shows, 2 different styles, etc., etc. In this respect, you can't blame WWE for adding these people to NXT. Old school fans of TNA and wrestling from the 2000s to the 2010s know and love these guys. They know Austin Aries, they know Bobby Roode, they know all these guys. You'll see WWE developing younger talent while the ex-TNA, I say that like that, ex-TNA, former TNA alumni get paid and work as hard as they can. The reason that you bring Samoa Joe in is so people like Finn Balor can be put over. It's so whoever's in the NXT developmental phase gets put over from these heels. It's just wrestling psychology at its finest. With the WWE Network in full swing, this is also an attempt to get ratings all the way up. I mean, getting Shinsuke Nakamura is going to get people on a global scale. People that are into wrestling will definitely tune into people they are curious about. Anyone that you bring in will have people talking. When Samoa Joe was rumored to come on, and then he came on, that shocked the world. Everyone wanted to see what was going on. I say this. I say the main roster is hurting in a sense because the main roster isn't hurt to begin with. With 5 hours combined of total television time a week, the 2 hours with SmackDown, the 3 hours with Raw, I'm not counting the pay-per-views because that's sometimes a mixed card. It's hard to put too much, it's hard to cram so much star power within those times. Raw has squash matches. They even have an issue with not putting enough people on. I mean, if you guys look at the WWE draft, you'll see picks 6 and below aren't relevant, with the exception of a few. The rest of those guys, are just there to do the live events beforehand. Possibly a dark match. Who knows? But to answer this question, is NXT hurting the WWE main roster? No. It definitely is not. In a sense, it's actually... Think of NXT as the USC college football system. It's actually an institution to develop superstars to the NFL. Think of the NFL as the WWE. You develop all these people at the intermediate level, including the ex-TNA guys, because you still need to work these ex-TNA guys to the WWE system. Let them know what the situations are, because Impact Wrestling is not how WWE Wrestling is, as far as camera displays, live events, scheduling, movesets, etc. You have to train these guys, let them take the baby steps within NXT, and then if creative decides that they are good enough for the main roster, i.e. Finn Balor, the Vaudevillains, American Alpha, Becky Lynch, Sasha Banks, Charlotte, Bayley, then they come up. The exception goes with AJ Styles. I think and I believe that AJ Styles had so much star power beforehand, even past TNA, in terms of Ring of Honor, joining the Bullet Club in New Japan Pro Wrestling, that he only needed to debut at the Royal Rumble because they had big plans for the guy. Is WWE getting hurt by NXT because they're not bringing up any of this talent? No, I don't think so. And I think Shinsuke Nakamura is going to come up in due time. I think that between the ages of 35 to 45, you could still put out great matches without exerting yourself to the limit. At this time of being 35 plus, you have done all the crazy spots that you've done from 25 to 30, and then you don't really, from 25 to 35, and you really don't need to do it anymore. You don't see people doing crazy spots anymore, being that aged and experienced within wrestling. It's all about psychology at that point. To answer the question, I really don't think NXT. I don't think WWE is getting hurt by NXT's roster, and I don't think vice versa. I think both of them are essentially the yin and yang to each other. One needs the other. One can't coexist without the other. You need developmental systems to develop young talent, bring them up when they're ready, and you need star power within each organization to make sure you put butts in the seats. That's what you do. I want to thank you guys for listening to the Pay-Per-Review Wrestling Podcast. I thank the Wrestling Facebook group that actually brought this topic about. And I also want to thank my sponsors, Game Swappers. This Pay-Per-View Wrestling Podcast is brought to you by none other than Game Swappers, the leading independent game store on Instagram with over 20,000 followers. You can catch Game Swappers via Instagram at GAMESWAPPERS. That's GAMESWAPPERS. Game Swappers, buy, sell, and trade. Keep in mind, guys, that if you do share the Pay-Per-View Wrestling Podcast or any of the podcasts on the Mark F Podcast channel, you'll be able to get 10% off towards your retro game purchases. If you want to trade in games, you'll be able to get 10% more towards your towards trading credit simply by sharing the podcast. All you have to do is take a screenshot of you sharing it via any means of social media, Facebook, Instagram, however you do it. Take a screenshot of it, show the people working at Game Swappers either in person at the store in Montclair or online via Game Swappers direct message, and you'll be able to get those going to you. Other than that, you guys have a good night. Keep in mind, I'll have a Backlash preview, and I'll also have one more podcast to do this week regarding a special topic that I have lined up. But other than that, you guys have a good night.